The New Orleans World's Fair faces its biggest crisis yet tonight, and only money, and lots of it, will solve the problem. News Center 6 tonight is next.
Your 1984 World's Fair station, WDSU TV 6.
News Center 6 tonight with Charles Ewey, Len Ganser, Buddy DiLiberto, and Dan Milham.
Good evening. The 1984 World's Fair has run out of money and has now gone to the legislature in a desperate attempt to come up with $10 million by Friday, or the fair may well face a construction shutdown. The fair needs $12 million by Friday to pay contractors. But the fair has also used up its $55 million line of credit. Advanced ticket sales and collections from licensees, exhibitors, and concessionaires have fallen below projections. As a result, Fair President Peter Spurney has asked Governor Edwin Edwards to get the legislature to approve $10 million by Friday, or the fair may face a shutdown in construction, obviously delaying its May 12th opening. Under a bill introduced by the Edwards administration, the Louisiana Exposition Authority, a state agency, would be given a $10 million line of credit. In turn, the Expo Authority would then lend the fair its credit, upon which the fair could get the money it needs from private banks. The remaining $2 million would come from an advance ticket sale to the Louisiana Superdome. Spurney, who was dining at Antoine's with officials from various countries participating in the fair, refused comment. But Fair Chairman Floyd Lewis explained that the $10 million would be repaid by late summer.
So it's not as though the money were being given to some project rather than another project. It is an advance that would be repaid and go back into the general fund, and by September would have been repaid and would be available for other state uses.
Lewis and Spurney met with Mayor Dutch Morial for 3 hours about the fair money problems and the fact that a number of concessionaires do not yet have occupational licenses. In addition, various construction projects at the fair still do not have proper city permits. Both Lewis and Morial were diplomatic in their descriptions of the session, but sources say it was blunt and angry. Morial, however, says he has no choice but to back the fair attempts to get the additional money.
We have the image and the prestige of the city on the line, and every effort should be put forth by all of us to see that the fair is a success and that we get nothing but positive results from it. And that's what we're trying to do in city government.
If the legislature sees it that way and approves the $10 million loan, the fair will then be $67 million in debt before the first paying customer walks through the turnstiles. All of this is politically embarrassing to Edwin Edwards, who after passing $700 million in taxes and saying that $350 million in cuts were still needed, that he must now go back before both houses and literally plead for $10 million to finish the World's Fair. But Edwards is expected to tell lawmakers that he has no other choice, no matter how embarrassing it all is.
Already faced with an almost $2 million deficit, the Regional Transit Authority tonight proposed what it hopes will be a temporary increase in certain bus fares to handle additional passengers expected for the World's Fair. Martha Leeson reports.
RTA officials say additional service during the World's Fair means additional costs. They hope to prevent nearly $2 million of debt by doubling the fare on Vieux Carré and CBD shuttles. The current 30-cent fare would increase to 60 cents. Officials say the increase is the only way they can meet the costs of additional personnel, buses, and bus routes. They say regular shuttle riders can avoid the increase in fares with the purchase of a monthly discount pass. There will also be new routes for the shuttles. RTA officials plan to modify the current routes to help tourists using transit to get to the fair. Martha Leeson, News Center 6.
Louisiana filed suit today in an effort to block an upcoming federal sale of 35 million acres of oil leases in the Gulf of Mexico. State Attorney General Billy Gust, who filed the suit in federal court, asked that the sale be stopped, saying it will hurt citizens of the nation. Gust says the sale, which is scheduled for Tuesday in New Orleans, would violate the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act. State Department tonight condemned Libya after a gunman firing from that country's embassy in London raked a protest rally with machine gun fire, killing a policewoman. At this hour, the standoff in London continues.
About 70 Libyan dissidents, most of them students living in Britain, and most of them masked, were demonstrating across the streets from the Libyan diplomatic mission. They were noisy but easily contained by London police. Suddenly, a burst of automatic fire from the embassy. Worst hit was a young policewoman, Yvonne Fletcher, shot twice in the stomach. She died a short while later in a hospital. Bodies lay in the streets. There was pandemonium. Ambulances rushed 12 wounded to hospital. The British have warned Libyan leader Colonel Gaddafi that violence must stop.
What is perhaps most infuriating to the British public tonight as this siege continues is the possibility that whoever did the shooting may go unpunished. Claiming diplomatic immunity, the killer may be beyond police authority and subject only to expulsion from the country.
Closer to home, 10 inmates on Angola's death row are continuing their 7-day-old hunger strike tonight. And a spokesman for the group says the inmates will starve themselves to death if necessary to make their point. Death row inmates understand the rules of prison, a controlled environment, maximum security. Those that violate the strict rules are singled out for extra punishment, giving up some of their few remaining rights. But recently, death row inmates at Angola say all inmates on Tier A are being arbitrarily punished. The tougher treatment comes on the heels of Louisiana's 3rd execution in 4 months.
Apparently, they feel in the warden's office that because they've started to execute people that they have to maintain an even tighter and more firm grip on the prisoners' lives. The prisoners themselves, because they have started executing people, are obviously more and more nervous and more concerned, and therefore the actions that the warden's taking are even more aggravating.
Quigley says the starving inmates have refused unusual offers of fried catfish, hamburgers, and glazed donuts, and are determined to protest to the end.
The right to visit with their family, the right to be with their attorneys, the right to recreation and adequate ventilation and like, those are rights that are very dear to them, and that they are willing to even give the ultimate sacrifice of their lives if they're not allowed to protect these rights.
Despite the protest, Corrections Secretary Paul Phelps says he will not bow to strike pressure.
Up next on News Center 6 tonight, a massive manhunt for an armed robbery suspect in Jefferson Parish finally pays off.
And the first of a 4-part report on the ill-fated Glomar Java Sea.
This segment of the news brought to you in part by American Automobile Association. To join AAA, call 838-7500.
6 months ago, a drilling rig sank in the South China Sea, and 81 crewmen may have died, including 4 from the New Orleans area. Tonight, reporter Leslie Hill begins a 4-part series into the sinking and some still unanswered questions.
For 4 New Orleans area families, the past 6 months have been filled with questions, but no answers. 6 months of anxiety and anguish. Their husbands and sons were aboard the Glomar Java Sea. The ship had been drilling for oil in waters claimed by both Vietnam and China. On October 25th, 1983, it sank, an apparent victim of Typhoon Lex.
The early predictions for that were that the storm would pass well to the north of the ship. On October the 24th, the prediction was that it would go approximately 200 miles away.
But testimony at Hong Kong Coast Guard hearings in January revealed the Chinese warned ARCO executives October 24th the typhoon was headed for the southern